I needed $4,200 for a hip replacement before I lost the ability to walk without a cane for the rest of my life. We just put a down payment on a boat, my son said. Money's tight right now. Then his wife grabbed the phone. Stop guilt-tripping him, Frank. We have our own family to think about. The line went dead. 3 days later, that same son would be pounding on my porch door so hard he cracked the storm window, begging me to undo something he never thought I'd have the nerve to do. But that morning, I didn't know anything about trusts, power of attorney, or what 31 years of quiet saving had built without me even noticing. I only knew my hip had locked up so bad I'd crawled up my own staircase the night before because I couldn't trust my leg to hold me. My name is Frank Delaney. I was 69 years old, living alone in a 2-story colonial outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in the house my wife Carol and I bought the year Nixon resigned. For 34 years, I drove long-haul trucks for a regional freight company, the kind of job that wrecks your knees, your back, and eventually your hips, one pothole and one 12-hour shift at a time. I'd always been the guy who fixed his own gutters, split his own firewood, carried his own groceries 2 at a time up the driveway. That made it harder to admit that some mornings I couldn't get out of bed without gritting my teeth so hard my jaw ached. It started 3 years ago as a dull ache after long drives. Then it became a limp I tried to hide at Thanksgiving. Then it became nights where I sat on the edge of the mattress at 2 a.m., unable to find a position that didn't feel like someone had driven a rail spike into my joint. I told myself it was just age. Then I fell in the Giant Eagle parking lot reaching for a shopping cart, and a stranger had to help me off the pavement while my hip screamed loud enough that I bit through my lip. That's what finally got me to the orthopedic surgeon. The waiting room smelled like hand sanitizer and old carpet. After the x-rays, the doctor clipped the images to the light board and turned to face me instead of the screen, which is never a good sign. Frank, the joint's bone on bone. There's almost no cartilage left. I asked him straight out. So what happens if I wait? He didn't sugarcoat it. You risk permanent nerve damage, and eventually you may not walk unassisted again. I wouldn't wait past a few weeks. After insurance, the surgical center wanted $4,200 up front before they'd even put me on the schedule. Some deductible gap my supplemental plan didn't cover, plus a pre-authorization fee they claimed was non-refundable. I had the money, technically. A paid-off house, a pension, a modest 401k. Carol and I built over 3 decades of skipping vacations so we could max out the contribution every January. But none of that helps you at a billing window that wants a check today. My emergency fund had already taken hits. Carol's last year, the chemo, the home hospice, the funeral. None of it had been cheap, even with insurance covering most of it. Then my water heater died. Then the transmission went on my truck. And 2 years before that, my son Kyle had called me at 11 at night, voice shaking. Dad, I really messed up. I need help or I'm going to lose everything. He'd co-signed a business loan for a buddy's landscaping company that folded within 6 months. I wired him $22,000 the next morning. Didn't make him sign a note. Didn't tell my sister. Didn't bring it up at Christmas. He was my son and he sounded scared, and there are certain phone calls a father doesn't hang up on. So I sat at my kitchen table with the surgical center's estimate under my palm, and I called him. Kyle answered on the 5th ring. Hey, Dad, can I call you back? We're kind of in the middle of something. I could hear laughter behind him, glasses clinking, someone shouting about wake settings. What's going on over there? I asked. We just closed on the boat, Dad. 26-footer. Karen's parents are here. We're celebrating. Kyle and his wife Karen had been talking about a boat for over a year. He'd texted me pictures of bayliners and pontoons more times than I could count. That's great, son, I said, and I almost let it go right there. Almost. Then the surgical estimate blurred a little in my vision, and I made myself say it. Kyle, I need to ask you something. His tone shifted immediately, careful. What's up? I told him about the hip, the bone-on-bone diagnosis, the $4,200 deposit, how the doctor didn't want me waiting. There was a long pause, long enough that I heard the boat engine idling somewhere behind him. Dad, honestly, we just put everything into this down payment. Money's really tight right now. I'm not asking you to hand it to me, I said. I'll pay it back within the year. I've got it coming from. That's when Karen took the phone. I heard the scuffle of it changing hands. Frank, listen, she said, not unkindly exactly, just flat. like she was reading off a script she'd rehearsed. "We love you, but we have our own family to think about. You need to stop calling Kyle every time something comes up. It's not fair to put that pressure on him. This is my hip, Karen. I might not walk again. I'm sorry you're going through that, but we just can't right now." Kyle didn't take the phone back. The line went dead a few seconds later, and I sat there holding my cell phone like it might still say something different if I waited long enough. I didn't cry. I want to say that plainly, because for a long time I thought that was a kind of strength. Now I think it was just a habit men my age got taught too early. I called my stepdaughter Renee instead, not because I expected anything, but because I needed to hear a voice that didn't make my chest feel like a fist was closing around it. Renee wasn't my blood. Carol brought her home when Renee was 16, a foster placement through the county after her mother lost custody and no relative would take her. She showed up at our door with a garbage bag of clothes because nobody had given her a suitcase, and she wouldn't make eye contact with either of us for the first 2 weeks. Carol had met her volunteering at a transitional housing program near the courthouse in downtown Harrisburg. Renee had been in and out of 6 placements since she was 12. By 16, she'd stopped unpacking anything, because unpacking meant believing you'd be allowed to stay. She slept with her shoes by the bed for the first month, laces already tied. At dinner that first week, she ate fast and quiet, and I caught her sliding 2 dinner rolls into her hoodie pocket when she thought we weren't looking. I never said a word about it. I just started leaving a plastic container of sandwiches in the fridge with a sticky note that said, "For whoever's hungry, no questions." By morning, it was always empty. She tested every boundary we had, because boundaries had only ever meant punishment to her before. "Where are you going?" sounded to her like an accusation. "What time will you be back?" sounded like a trap being set. One night, she came in almost 3 hours past curfew and found me on the porch steps in my work coat. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs like she was bracing for impact. "I know," she said. "I'll grab my stuff. You'll get inside is what you'll do," I told her. She blinked. "You're kicking me out." "No, I'm angry." "Those aren't the same thing. What's the difference?" That question sat with me a long time. I stood up slow, because I'd spent all day loading a trailer, and my hip was already starting its long, slow complaint. "The difference," I said, "is you still have to face me tomorrow morning. Nobody's going anywhere." She didn't believe me, but she came inside. Another time, learning to drive my truck in the church parking lot, she clipped a light pole and cracked the side mirror clean off. She got out shaking, already talking fast. "I'll pay for it, I swear, or I'll just go. It's fine. Renee." I cut her off. I handed her a roll of electrical tape from the glove box. "Hold this while I see what we're working with." She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You're not sending me back? You hit a pole. You didn't total the truck. Nobody's sending anybody anywhere over a mirror." It took years for her to understand that a mistake could have a consequence without the consequence being abandonment. She got suspended once for shoving a boy who'd made a crack about foster kids getting recycled. Carol sat through the whole disciplinary meeting with her spine straight as a fence post. On the drive home, Renee stared out the window and said, "You can stop pretending now." Carol didn't take her eyes off the road. "Pretending what?" "That you actually want me here." Carol pulled into a CVS parking lot, put the car in park, and turned around fully in her seat. "We're dealing with what you did," she said. "We are not throwing away the person who did it." Renee didn't speak the rest of the ride. But that night, I noticed her garbage bag she still hadn't upgraded to a suitcase by then had been pushed all the way to the back of her closet. Carol and I both understood what that meant. She was starting to believe she might get to stay. Kyle was already 17 and a junior in high school when Renee arrived, and he never quite figured out what to do with her. Not cruel, not really. Just distant and occasionally sharp in that teenage way. "Guess I'm not the only one anymore," he said once, half joking, half not. Carol used to tell him love wasn't a pizza giving someone else a slice, didn't shrink his. I mostly stayed quiet through all of it. That was one of my failures as a father. I kept telling myself Kyle would grow out of the resentment on his own timeline, because that's the story fathers tell themselves when they don't want to have the harder conversation. Renee graduated with decent grades and perfect attendance her last 2 years. When she said she wanted to become a physical therapist, she told us it was because hurt people deserve somebody who actually shows up. Financial aid covered most of nursing school, physical therapy school, rather but not all of it. I picked up extra runs hauling freight on weekends. Carol sold a ring she rarely wore. Renee never forgot either of those things. Years later, after she'd been working at a rehab clinic outside the city for a while, she asked Carol and me to meet her at the Dauphin County Courthouse. She was 23. The clerk looked over the paperwork and said, "Kindly, most folks do this when the child's a lot younger." Renee just said, "The paperwork's late. The family isn't." Carol cried so hard in the hallway, a security guard asked if she needed water. I told everyone it was allergies. So when I called her that afternoon, after Karen hung up on me, it wasn't really to ask for anything. I just needed to hear someone who wouldn't make me feel like an inconvenience with a heartbeat. "Dad, what's wrong?" She could always hear it in the first 3 words. I told her about the hip, the deposit, the call with Kyle and Karen. There was a silence on the line, the kind that isn't empty, just loaded. "I'll wire it tonight," she said. "Renee, I didn't call for that." "I know you didn't. That's exactly why I'm doing it. I'll pay you back. Every dollar." "That sounds like a threat." I laughed, actually laughed, the first time since the doctor's office. That was Renee all over. She never made speeches. She just planted her feet and waited for the rest of the world to catch up to her. By 9 the next morning, she'd already called the surgical center herself, confirmed the deposit had cleared, and locked in a Thursday surgery date. I told her I could Uber myself home afterward. "They won't release you without a responsible adult signing you out and staying the first night." "I am a responsible adult." "Then start acting like one and stop arguing with your physical therapist." "Daughter." I sent Kyle one text. "Surgery's Thursday." Renee handled the deposit. Delivered. Never answered. Thursday morning, Renee picked me up before 6. The pre-op room was cold and too bright. She sat beside me reading the consent forms out loud because my hands were shaking too much to hold my readers steady. When the nurse came to wheel me back, I handed Renee my house key without really thinking about it. She closed my fingers around it and pushed it back into my palm. "Keep it. You gave me a key to this house before I believed I belonged in it. I'm not taking it from you now." The surgery went fine. Recovery was the usual grind walker. Ice, exercises 3 times a day that felt like punishment, staples that itched worse than any mosquito bite I'd ever had. Renee came by most mornings before her shift or after 12-hour days at the clinic, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. She never once asked what the surgery cost, never asked when I planned to pay her back. She just checked my incision, refilled my pill organizer, and made sure there was food that wasn't microwave garbage. Kyle texted 6 days after the operation. "Hope surgery went okay. Things have been crazy with the boat and work." I stared at that message a long time. Not because it was cruel, because it was so empty. He hadn't asked if I could walk, if I was in pain, if I was scared. He was explaining his own absence instead of asking about my recovery. I typed 4 different replies and deleted every one. In the end, I sent nothing back at all. 12 days out, my surgeon cleared me to put full weight on the leg during my follow-up. "You're healing exactly the way we like to see," he said, watching me walk the hallway without the walker for the first time. For the first time in months, I believed I might actually get my life back instead of just managing the decline of it. That afternoon, Renee drove me home, and I asked her to help me find some paperwork. Insurance records, some old investment statements. Your mother always knew where everything was. Carol's roll-top desk sat untouched in the spare room. I hadn't opened the bottom drawer since the month after her funeral. Not because I couldn't, but because I hadn't been ready. Renee carried the little fireproof box to the kitchen table, while I found the spare key taped under the drawer, right where Carol always hid it, in a spot only she and I ever remembered. Inside were folders labeled in Carol's neat handwriting house deed, retirement statements, tax returns, and one envelope that just said Frank in her handwriting. My chest went tight. "I'll read it later," I said. Renee started to set it aside, then stopped. "Actually," she said softly, "I think she'd want you to read it now." She walked into the other room to give me space. Inside was a letter. "Frank, if you're reading this, I'm not there anymore to remind you that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. You've spent your whole life believing love means enduring everything quietly. It doesn't. Some people will carry you when your legs get tired. Some people won't, even if they share your last name. Don't split what we build out of guilt. Take care of yourself first. Then leave the rest where you found real loyalty, not where blood tells you it's owed. I love you always. Carol." I read the last two lines 3 times. Not because they were hard to read, because they hurt exactly as much as she knew they would. Carol had always understood that I'd keep handing Kyle chances long after good sense told me to stop. The following Monday, I called Marjorie Standish, the attorney who'd handled Carol's estate work for years, office 2 blocks off Market Square. "Frank," she said, standing to shake my hand, "how's the hip?" "Better every day." "Good." Carol was very deliberate about her paperwork. I think she anticipated something like this. "What's that supposed to mean?" "That someday you'd need someone to give you permission to put yourself first." We spent almost 2 hours going through the trust Carol and I had set up years before. Plain English, no jargon. I was still in full control. I could change beneficiaries. I could reassign who held medical power of attorney if I couldn't speak for myself. I could replace whoever was named to manage my finances if I ever lost the capacity to do it myself. I frowned. "Kyle's listed for all 3 of those, isn't he?" "He is." "Which means if something happened to you tomorrow, he'd have significant control." A cold feeling moved through me that had nothing to do with the epidural wearing off. For the first time since my diagnosis, the thing that scared me most wasn't my hip. It was picturing Karen going through my checkbook while Kyle decided what my care was worth paying for. Marjorie asked the right questions, the way a good lawyer does instead of just pushing paper at you. Did I understand the value of the estate? Yes, the house, paid off, worth more than I'd ever admit out loud. The pension? Carol's small life insurance policy. A strip of land her father left her outside Hershey. Altogether, just over $980,000. Was anyone pressuring me? No. Had Renee asked to be put in charge of anything? Absolutely not. She didn't even know this meeting was happening. Was I angry at Kyle? Yes, I said. But that's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? Because if I'm ever lying in a hospital bed, unable to talk, I need the person making decisions to be thinking about me, not about what my care is costing them. We spent another hour on details. I left Kyle 30% of the estate, not because he'd earned it, and not because I wanted to look merciful in front of a judge someday. He was still my son, and I couldn't erase 34 years over one phone call. But I also couldn't pretend that one call hadn't revealed years of distance I'd been quietly excusing. Renee would get 70%, including the house, and I named her my healthcare proxy. Marjorie's firm would take over as successor trustee instead of Kyle. A portion was set aside strictly for my long-term care, and a smaller piece would go to a program that helps retired truckers get physical therapy they can't afford. Kyle would still inherit money someday. What he would not inherit was control over me while I was alive to feel it. 3 weeks later, we all sat in Marjorie's conference room. Kyle and Karen arrived early. I could see them through the glass wall from the elevator. Karen in a blazer with a leather folder open on her lap, tapping a pen like she was preparing for a deposition. They looked ready for a negotiation. Renee walked in 4 minutes late in her clinic scrubs, coffee in hand. "Sorry, had a discharge issue with a patient." "You're fine," Marjorie told her, and she took the seat farthest from the head of the table. No folder, no notes, nothing to defend. Kyle stood and gave me an awkward half hug. "How's the hip?" "You could have asked that 11 days ago." His jaw tightened. "You caught us at a bad time with the boat closing." Karen leaned forward. "The closing costs were honestly a lot more than we expected, Frank. There were fees nobody warned us." Renee looked down into her coffee cup, jaw working like she was biting something back. Marjorie opened the folder. "Frank has completed several amendments to his estate plan. Before we go through them, I want to be clear Frank underwent an independent capacity evaluation. These changes are lawful, voluntary, and already executed. This meeting is informational, not a negotiation." Karen's pen stopped moving mid-stroke. Kyle stared at me. "Already executed?" "Yes," Marjorie said. She started with the roles. Kyle had been removed as financial power of attorney, removed as healthcare proxy, removed as successor trustee. "You're putting Renee in charge of everything?" Kyle asked. "No," I said. "Marjorie's firm handles the money if I can't. Renee speaks for my healthcare." "Why her?" "Because she's already proven she shows up when I'm scared. And you've proven you show up when there's a boat to celebrate." Renee turned toward me, blindsided. "Dad, you didn't tell me any of this." "I know. I don't know if I'm qualified for that. You're a physical therapist who spent a decade learning how to sit with people in pain. You're plenty qualified. And it's not really about the license. Today. It's that you came. She looked uncomfortable saying yes to it, which is exactly why I trusted her with it. Karen cleared her throat. And the house? The investments? There it was. Not is Frank okay? Not how's the hip healing? Straight to the number. Marjorie explained calmly, 70% to Renee, including the house, provided it stayed in the trust. 30% to Kyle. Renee went pale. No, she said immediately. Dad, no. I didn't help you so you'd do this. I know that. You can't make it look like I did it for this. I'm not making it look like anything. I'm telling the truth about who shows up. Then change it back. Karen let out a short, sharp laugh. Unbelievable. Kyle turned on her. What? I told you to call your father back after the surgery. You were the one who took the phone out of my hand. I let you, because you didn't want to deal with it and you know it. Their voices climbed over each other until I lifted a hand. She may have taken the phone, Kyle, but you're the one who let the call end. He looked at me and, for the first time that whole meeting, had no comeback ready. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded receipt from the surgical center, the one Renee had wired the money against. The funds were long gone, deposited weeks earlier, but I'd kept the paper. I laid it on the table. She worked a 12-hour shift the day I called her. She's got student loans and a car payment and her own rent. She didn't ask if I'd pay her back before she sent it. She didn't know about any trust. She just heard that I was scared, and she moved. Renee shook her head. Dad, please, don't. She didn't know what any of this was worth, I said, tapping the folder. You knew exactly what it was worth, and you still let a boat outbid your father's hip. We didn't have $4,000 just lying around, Kyle said. You had the money. What you didn't have was the willingness. That's not fair. You just put a down payment on a 26-foot boat. You were stretched thin between a marina slip and your father's hip. The room went dead quiet. You made a choice, Kyle. I'm not punishing you for it. I'm just done pretending it didn't tell me something. His jaw was tight enough to see the muscle jump. I'm your son. Yes. Mom would never have wanted this. I unfolded Carol's letter, hands steadier than I expected them to be. I only read one line out loud. Leave the rest where you found real loyalty, not where blood tells you it's owed. Kyle looked away from me for a long moment. Renee wiped her cheek fast with the back of her wrist. Marjorie closed the folder. The amendments become final after the standard waiting period. Kyle stood. Delay it. That's not my decision to make, Marjorie said. It's Frank's. He looked at me. Dad? No. Karen snapped her folder shut. This is going to tear this family apart. I stood up slowly, testing the new hip's weight the way I'd been taught in therapy. The paperwork didn't tear anything apart. It just stopped pretending nothing already had. They left without saying goodbye. Through the glass, I watched them arguing beside their car in the parking lot below. Renee came and stood near me at the window, then offered me her arm toward the elevator. I don't need it anymore, actually, I told her, testing a few steps unassisted. I know, she said. I'm still walking next to you anyway. The pounding started 3 days later, a Saturday morning, hard enough to rattle Carol's picture on the entry wall. I was at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, reading the paper without holding it 2 feet from my face for the first time in a year. New hip, better posture, better everything. The sound made me flinch so bad I nearly knocked the mug over. I pulled the curtain back. Kyle stood on the porch, and he didn't look like the man who'd walked into that conference room. No polo shirt, no boat shoes. His clothes looked slept in. His eyes were red, not from drinking, from not sleeping. In one fist, he had the folded estate papers, creased soft from being opened and closed too many times. He saw me through the glass. Dad, please, just one word. I opened the door but didn't step aside right away. Please, he said again. I let him in. Nothing in the house had changed. Carol's Afghan still hung over the couch. The clock in the hall still ticked. The photos still lined the stairwell, and now I could actually see the faces in them clearly for the first time in years. I'll make coffee, I said. He nodded, not trusting his voice yet. We sat at the kitchen table, him in the same chair he'd occupied for 30-some years of breakfast. For half a second, all I could see was the 8-year-old who used to ask if cereal counted as a meal if you ate 2 bowls. Then I looked at the papers in his hand, and the 8-year-old disappeared. Dad, this has spiraled completely out of control. Has it? You changed everything because of one phone call. One phone call? I leaned back. Kyle, I honestly don't think you understand what you're describing. He rubbed both hands down his face. We were under pressure with the closing. I know. The boat. I know the fees. I let that sit. Which part was the actual bad moment for you, Kyle? Saying no to me? Or letting your wife say it for you? Or not calling me for 6 days after surgery? His shoulders dropped an inch at a time with each question. I texted, "You explained your own absence. You never once asked how I was doing." He swallowed hard. I figured Renee had it handled. There it is. What? You assumed somebody else was taking care of your father. I let that land the way it needed to. Older people experience loneliness differently than younger folks think they do. It's rarely about being physically alone. It's about becoming invisible. Everyone assumes somebody else called, somebody else checked in, somebody else picked up the prescription, somebody else made sure you got home safe from the hospital. Eventually, everyone assumes. Nobody actually knows. I didn't think of it that way, Kyle said quietly. I know. He looked miserable in a way I hadn't seen since Carol's funeral. I've replayed that call 100 times. So have I. I should have come over. I should have called. I should have. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Dad. I believe that he meant it. I also knew that apologies show up a lot easier once there's a consequence attached to them. He took a breath. Karen, I lifted one finger. Don't. He stopped. She was under a lot of stress with the closing. So were you. She spoke the words, but you agreed with the silence that came after. His shoulders caved in completely. There wasn't anything left in that particular argument to hold on to. After a long quiet, he asked, "Can I ask you something?" You just did. A tired half smile flickered across his face. Fair. He unfolded the papers on the table between us. I keep thinking there's got to be some way to fix this. I didn't answer right away. I know I messed up, he said. You did. I know Renee deserves more credit than I ever gave her. She does. I know I hurt you. Yes. He looked straight at me then. So what do I do? That deserved an honest answer, not a comforting one. You start by understanding this was never about the money. But the paperwork stays exactly where it is. His face fell. So nothing changes. The trust doesn't change. What happens next between you and me, that part's still unwritten. He closed his eyes. I've lost everything. No, I said, leaning forward. You've still got your job, your kids, your health. You've still got 30% of an estate you never lifted a finger for. What you've lost is control. And I understand that hurts worse than losing money ever could, because for years you assumed you'd just quietly inherit the running of my life someday. Nobody ever promised you that. You just decided it was owed to you. He wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand, not dramatically, just a man finally letting something crack open. If there hadn't been a trust, he started then stopped. If there'd been nothing waiting for you to protect, I said gently, would you still be sitting at this table this morning? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower started up. Finally, he said, I don't know. And I hate that I don't know. That's the most honest thing you've said to me in 2 years. I reached into the kitchen drawer and pulled out the surgical center receipt, the one I'd kept since the conference room. I set it between us. What's this? He asked. The reason I can walk into this kitchen without a cane. He read it slowly, then read it again. She really paid for all of it? Every dollar. Never told you. Never told anyone. Why not? Because she wasn't trying to make you look bad. She just did what needed doing. He sat with that a long time. I kept thinking she was trying to replace me. Kyle? Nobody replaces a son. Hope flickered across his face for half a second before I finished the sentence. But a son can absolutely abandon what comes with being one. The hope went out like a pinched candle. I don't know how to fix this, he said. You don't fix it today, I told him, standing to carry our mugs to the sink. You fix it across about 100 ordinary Sundays. You call because you want to hear my voice, not because you need something signed. You show up when nothing dramatic's happening. You stop treating this family like an investment portfolio you only check on when the numbers move. Behind me, I heard him crying, quiet, not performing it for anyone. When I turned around, he looked older than 41. I don't want the money anymore, he said. I believe you. Then why won't you change it back? Because if I did, I said, sitting back down across from him, neither of us would ever really know whether you came back for me or for what might still someday be yours. He closed his eyes. I understand. I hope one day you actually will. At the door, he hesitated. Can I come back next weekend? You don't need my permission to knock. He nodded, glanced toward Carol's photo on the wall. Can you really see better now? I smiled. Better than I have in years. He understood exactly what I meant by that, and he walked down the driveway without me calling after him. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. There was no satisfaction waiting in that kitchen, just something quieter. Sadness, and underneath it, something that felt a lot like relief. By early spring, I was walking 2 miles most mornings without so much as a limp, out along the old towpath by the river where Carol and I used to walk on Sunday afternoons. At my next follow-up, the surgeon had me walk the length of the hallway and back. Full range of motion, Frank. You're exactly where we want you. Renee sat in the corner chair with her purse in her lap. Guess she doesn't have to keep chauffeuring me around anymore, I said. The doctor smiled. That's between you and your daughter. On the drive home, she glanced over at a red light. You finally catching on that I'm not going anywhere? I laughed for real. For years, I'd believed independence meant never needing a soul on this earth. Getting old has a way of correcting that particular arrogance. Real independence isn't managing everything alone, it's knowing the people helping you aren't standing there with their hand out waiting for something in return. A week later, Renee came for Sunday dinner. I made Carol's pot roast from the recipe card in her handwriting, and for the first time in a long while, I could read every word of it without squinting under the kitchen lamp. Add the onions after 1 hour underlined twice, because I always dump them in too early. Renee caught me smiling at the card. What? Your mother's still correcting me from the great beyond. She was usually right. Don't encourage her. After dinner, she stayed at the table instead of clearing the plates. I want to talk about the trust. What about it? I still think 70% is too much. That depends what's left of me to spend it on by the time it matters. You know what I mean. I don't want you thinking I helped you because of this. And I really don't want Kyle thinking that either. He might for a while. That bothers me. I know it does. That's exactly why it's yours. I told her plainly, it was never payment for one good deed. It was 3 decades of showing up sitting with Carol through chemo, checking on me after the funeral, remembering anniversaries nobody else wanted to mention out loud, showing up on ordinary Sundays with nothing to gain and nothing dramatic happening. I'm leaving the house to somebody who actually understands why it matters, I said. She looked around the kitchen a long moment, the worn cabinets, the clock over the stove, Carol's recipe box, and finally nodded. Only if your care always comes first. It does. Marjorie's firm handles the money if I can't. Fine. Then I'll stop arguing about it. That'll be a first. She laughed and threw the dish towel at my chest. Kyle's return was slower, and honestly, that was probably right. The first Sunday after our kitchen conversation, he called at 7, and I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. Hey, Dad, just checking in. No need to call back if you're not up for it. The next Sunday, he called again, and I answered. We talked 6 minutes, weather, work, his daughter's science fair project. He didn't mention the trust once. 2 weeks after that, he offered to drive me to a follow-up. Renee's already got it covered, I told him. Okay, he said, no sigh. No guilt trip buried in it. Just okay. A month later, he showed up with 2 coffees and noticed the porch railing had gone soft with rot. That thing's about to give out on you. I know. Want me to fix it? Do you actually know how? He looked genuinely offended. You taught me. I taught you to hold a flashlight and complain about the mosquitoes. He laughed, actually laughed. Some lessons take longer than others, I guess. The following Saturday, he came back in old jeans and a paint-stained sweatshirt, carrying a post-hole digger and the wrong size bag of concrete mix. I didn't correct him right away. Some things are worth letting a man learn on his own time. He worked almost 2 hours before the rotted railing post finally came loose, sweat cutting lines through the dust on his forearms despite the cool morning. I sat on the top step and watched. Eventually, he leaned against the fresh post and said, I've been thinking about what you said, about treating family like a portfolio. And I think I've been doing that since before Mom even died. I just never called it that. The yard was quiet except for a sprinkler ticking 2 yards over. I made you feel like an inconvenience, he said. Yes, I'm sorry. I believe you. That doesn't mean it's repaired yet. He nodded at the new post. Do you think we ever really get back to normal? No, I said honestly. His face tightened, bracing for the rest of it. But that doesn't mean we can't go forward from here. He took the mug I brought out for him, and we drank our coffee without saying much else. Then I pointed at the new post. It's leaning. It's straight, Dad. Get the level. He shook his head, smiling despite himself, and went and got the level. Growing old takes things from you that nobody really warns you about: your speed, your knees, your spouse, sometimes your nerve. But the deepest wound isn't always in your body. Sometimes it's realizing that the people you spent decades carrying stop noticing the exact moment you start to stumble. I learned something else too, something Carol had clearly known long before I caught up to her. Forgiveness doesn't require handing someone back the exact same power they already proved they'd misuse. Boundaries aren't cruelty. Love can leave the porch light on without handing over the keys to the whole house. Renee's receipt still sits folded in Carol's roll-top desk, right beside her letter. One reminds me what real love looks like when it costs something. The other reminds me that love, the genuine kind, usually finds its way back to you eventually, even if it takes the long way around. Kyle and I are still rebuilding what cracked between us. Some weeks we make real progress. Some weeks we just drink coffee on the porch and argue about whether a fence post is standing straight. But these days, when he knocks on my door, I know it isn't because of what he stands to inherit. It's because I'm still his father. And for the first time in a long while, that's finally enough for both of us. If somebody stood by you when your world went dark, that kind of loyalty deserves to be remembered out loud. Tell someone their story today. Sometimes people just need proof that real, dependable love still exists in this world. Family isn't proven by blood, it's proven by who shows up when things get hard. Real love doesn't keep score, and real strength isn't doing everything alone. It's letting the right people carry you when your legs get tired. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're just honesty about who's earned your trust. Sometimes the family we choose loves us better than the family we were given, and that's worth celebrating, not mourning. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while hoping to share a positive lesson about love and loyalty along the way.